Hey guys, so I got a video for you here. It's from Crash Course U.S. History. You've probably seen them before, but it does a good job of introducing our first um, historical topic, which is the Industrial Revolution after the Civil War. So here's how it's going to work. I'm going to play the video, and I'm going to pause it at various points, and I'll just pose a question. So I want you to stop and reflect about the answer to that question. Write the answer down, type it out for me in a doc, and you'll submit that to me. So very, very simple. So here we go.
Introducing the Mobile Skimmer. So we've partnered with, as well as built out a team of engineers to custom manufacture.
You might want to hold off on that Libertage stand, because this happened mostly thanks to the not particularly awesome Civil War, which improved the finance system by forcing the introduction of a national currency and spurred industrialization by giving massive contracts to arms and clothing manufacturers. The Civil War also boosted the telegraph, which improved communication and gave birth to the Transcontinental Railway via the Pacific Railway Act of 1862, all of which increased efficiency and productivity. So thanks, Civil War.
So here's your first question. How did the Civil War change the American economy? So how did the Civil War change the American economy? Type that out on a doc. Take as long as you need. Just hit play when you're ready to go.
If you want to explain America's economic growth in a nutshell, chalk it up to G, D, and L. Girard, Depardieu, and Lohan. No, geography, demography, and law. However, while we're on the topic, when will Girard Depardieu and Lindsay Lohan have a baby? Stan, can I see it? Yes! Yes! Geographically, the U.S. was a huge country with all the resources necessary for an industrial boom. Like, we had coal and iron and later oil. Initially, we had water to power our factories, later replaced by coal. And we had amber waves of grain to feed our growing population, which leads to the demography. America's population grew from 40 million in 1870 to 76 million in 1900, and a third of that growth was due to immigration, which is good for economies. Many of these immigrants flooded the burgeoning cities as America shifted from being an agrarian rural nation to being an industrial urban one. Like, New York City became the center of commerce and finance, and by 1898 it had a population of 3.4 million people, and the industrial heartland.
So here's your next question. So how did immigration being people coming to America from other countries, how did that impact the economy? How did that cause economic growth? So again, immigration, think about that, and all these people coming to America, how is that going to affect economic growth? You're done answering, just continue.
And was in the Great Lakes region. Chicago became the second largest city by 1900, Cleveland became a leader in oil refining, and Pittsburgh was a center of iron and steel production. And even today, the great city of Pittsburgh still employs 53 steelers. Last but not least was the law. The Constitution and its Commerce Clause made the U.S. a single area of commerce, like a giant customs union. And as we'll see in a bit, the Supreme Court interpreted the laws in a very business-friendly way. Also, the American Constitution protects patents, which encourages invention and innovation, or at least it used to. And despite what Ayn Rand would tell you, the American government played a role in American economic growth by putting up high tariffs, especially on steel, giving massive land grants to railroads, and by putting Native Americans on reservations. Also, foreigners played an important role. They invested their capital and involved Americans in their economic scandals, like the one that led to a depression in 1893. The U.S. was at the time seen by Europeans as a developing economy, and investments in America offered much higher returns than those available in Europe. And the changes we're talking about here were massive.
So here's your next question. So how did foreigners from Europe, what did they do to kind of get involved or jump on the growing American economy, which just caused it to grow more? So how did the European folks from overseas, how did they get involved and impact American economic growth during this time?
In 1880, for the first time, a majority of the workforce worked in non-farming jobs. By 1890, 2/3 of Americans worked for wages rather than farming or owning their own businesses. And by 1913, the United States produced 1/3 of the world's total industrial output. Now bring out the Libertage stand. Awesome, and even better, we now get to talk about perennially underrated railroads. railroads. Let's go to the
So your next question. So the average American citizen, where did they start to work? Where were many of them working? And what were they trying to earn when they worked? This seems like a simple question. It is a simple question. So where did Americans begin working? And what were they actually earning when they worked? Like, how were they paid?
thought bubble. Although we tend to forget about them here in the US because our passenger rail system sucks, railroads were one of the keys to America's 19th century industrial success. Railroads increased commerce and integrated the American market, which allowed national brands to emerge like Ivory soap and A&P grocery stores. But railroads changed and improved our economy in less obvious ways too. For instance, they gave us time zones, which were created by the major railroad companies to make shipping and passenger transport more standard. Also, because he recognized the importance of telling time, a railroad agent named Richard Warren Sears turned a $50 investment in watches into an enormous mail-order empire, and railroads made it possible for him and his eventual partner Roebuck to ship watches and then jewelry and then pretty much everything, including unconstructed freaking houses throughout the country. Railroads were also the first modern corporations. These companies were large, they had many employees, they spanned the country, and that meant they needed to invent organizational methods, including the middle manager, supervisors to supervise supervisors. And for the first time, the owners of a company were not always day-to-day managers because railroads were among the first publicly traded corporations. They needed a lot of capital to build tracks and stations, so they sold.
All right, last question. Discuss the impact of railroads. Like, why were railroads a big deal during this time, and how did they impact American growth? And that's your last question. All right, so when you get those done, type them out on a doc, watch as many times as you need, and you post them on Google Classroom for me. See ya.